The Detroit Institute of Arts is located on the northeast corner of Woodward and Farnsworth. It's the backdrop for Talbia Inc.'s interpretation of the 1934 Diego Rivera's murals commissioned by Henry Ford. During Michelle's career of understanding the urban and social issues of deindustrialization, these corners have often been the inspiration of encouragement.
Buenos dias. My name is Michelle Abdelaziz. I'm a social scientist, urban planner, founder of Talbia Inc., a place-based nonprofit in Southeast Michigan. Today, we are here at the Detroit Institute of Art. The Rivera Court was commissioned by Henry Ford and painted by a Mexican artist, Diego Rivera, who studied frescoes in Paris. Here we are in the southwest corner of the Rivera Court. And from this wall, on the west wall, we learn a lot about our global society and our connectivity. Diego Rivera first starts us off with management on the northwest corner, and then he takes us up across our connections globally, and then we come down to our backdrop of the worker, the craftsman, who really is the hinge pin of our global society. We began at the west wall and then transitioned to the north wall. And now we're here at the south wall, where we can see the different type of work that occurred in factories, and where people who worked on the assembly line may have felt that there was a different type of classism forming. We have to remember Rivera was a Marxist, and so he shows us insight on the south wall and what occurs, and this is well spilled out onto the geographical landscape.
Created by the deindustrialization has created green areas. In other words, what we leave, Mother Nature sort of takes back. And so there's an experiment going on in the city of Detroit, and the planning and the master planning is picking up on this, being able to inject green space, parks, urban agriculture, other elements to fill the void and really create a richness that's going to be uniquely Detroit.
My name is Jeff Adams. I'm the owner of Artesian Farms. It's a new business here in Detroit. That's a vertical farm that will be growing greens and lettuce, tomatoes, other flowering vegetables right in the Brightmoor community of Detroit. But I think the small manufacturing facilities can be saved and can be transformed into something different than what they were originally intended for. The building that I purchased was a metal stamping plant or a metal working plant, and we're going to put a vertical farm in that building and raise vegetables year-round here in Detroit for the local economy. So I think there's ways that we can identify industries that we typically don't think of as being here in Detroit, and bring those industries into Detroit, like urban agriculture, where it's a commercially viable business.
Malik Yakini, I'm Executive Director of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. Well, there's many things that on a grassroots level are being done to reimagine the city of Detroit. One of the most significant is the urban agriculture movement. We have in Detroit currently more than 1,400 small gardens, farms, and other types of agricultural projects, which are not only providing greater access to food, which is a huge problem in the city of Detroit, access to healthy food, but they're also bringing people together and restoring within people their own sense of capacity to change our reality.
Hi, my name is Marvin. I'm from Detroit. I'm here down here, the Harmony District, better known as Paradise Valley. Everybody is out here is not stupid. We know what needs to be done. We just need jobs. We just need, basically people just want a job, work, take care of their families.
So Summer Woods and proud mentor of Midnight Golf Program. That what's taking place is not taking into consideration a lot of, from a community perspective, our young people, the next generation, quality of life, what their environment is like, how to make their environment better, to want to do better. I think that it's great impact, because what they see is what they don't know, but what they see in their community versus understanding there's something bigger and better. Very interesting conditions that, although they can be great students and excel within the academia world, but when you have to come home to just a dysfunctional, just quality of life, just your block, your abandoned homes, bombed out, you know, it makes a difference.
My name is Norberto Garita. I'm one of the owners from El Bartón, business in this kind of area. But when you have the feelings and you have the skills, probably you can make it. Restaurant is a lot of challenges, you know, especially in this area. When we started, it was we only have like 6 tables, 25 chairs. We wasn't that busy. We wasn't. It was very tough for at least, like, say, 2 years and a half. We just was constantly, you know, stay there. I mean, at the beginning, we don't have any to pay the bills or even to pay to us, you know. But when people discovering the food and start coming down, you know, we was in the business growing up. Many business around, so you think you're gonna make it, you're not gonna make it. I don't know, but I mean, it's tough. But like say, you know, we are making it. We're making it. Kitchen, you know, that's something that I think in order to succeed business, you have to know a little bit everything, you know. So I'm not in the kitchen 100%, but I always there too. So just to keep an eye on the food, how we're gonna make it, what it's gonna be for the special. So that's very important, to be behind of the team. I know I have my chef, but I have to be there to feel the food as well.
Nasser Beydoun, you know, we were much more united. There was a core group that kind of steered the community. And now as we got larger and first generation, second generation, third generation, we kind of become more blended in to the society and kind of lost a little bit of our core values. Right, Metro Detroit is a highly segregated, was a very highly segregated society. You know, you had the African American community and the non-African American community. But as time passes on, we're watching this people coming together, and that walls of segregation are coming down, and bridges of understanding are being built between the communities. So, you know, prior years there was a lot of conflict. We see a lot of that conflict kind of dying down and people getting to know each other and respecting each other. We still have issues, but it's much better than it was before.
My name is Carla Henderson, and I'm Executive Director of Pony Ride. We're going to have some challenges achieving social equity here in Detroit. It is my hope that we continue to work where our residents are located, but I think that is going to be a challenge. It just depends on who you ask as a community. I like to use the term any stakeholder is a part of the community, not just so much the residents, but there are some very responsible landowners that are just as frustrated as the residents are about some of the vacant buildings that have been left behind, and are coming up with creative ways to combat some of that blight. Firsthand about the contribution that Pony Ride is making to the community. We offer access to space. It's a resource collaboration. For instance, the woman who is running the empowerment plan, Veronica Scott, is hiring women out of the homeless shelters, offering full-time jobs to create coats that turn into sleeping bags that then goes back into the society to some of our most vulnerable population, the homeless population. So I think that there is kind of that full circle of life that is created here, specifically because we're able to provide access to space and resources at 75% discount of what the market rate would be.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Reginald Anthony. I'm a Youth Advisory Board member for the Better Detroit Youth Movement. I'm excited to be with you all. I'm excited to share some of my perspectives of what's going on and what needs to take place in this city of Detroit. As you may know, I'm 24 years old. And one of the things we wanted to spot out was the youth perspective on what's going on. So I really want to give you my heart on what's happening. Currently, what's so about this city, we have a lot of blame game going on. He said, she said, he did this, he did that. Quite frankly, I'm not a fan of the blame game. If you ask me, a leader makes a way and not in this.
The thing I'd like to add to that about our heritage and our founder, we've always created architecture that is connected to the street.
Yes, my name is Summer Woods, Director of External Relations for M1 Rail. Connectivity in our region, I think that we got some work to do. SMART operates their own, DDOT operates their own, People Mover operates their own. One of the things that's been important with our project is we never want this project to be perceived as that it's just for one demographic of people. That's not what it is. This streetcar system is going to be for everyone, and that's important. And I think the key in that is connectivity, so that if you do have a DDOT car, that you can use a transfer to get on M1, if you have a smart car. And so I think when you have the conversation of the RTA, that's one of the things that's been on the table is connectivity. A lot of the different advisory councils that have come to community representation that has come to those tables has talked about connectivity. So I think it's a bigger, huge conversation that we have to have. And so as we continue to just move forward with conversations with RTA, hopefully that will be mitigated. But we do have some work to do because there is no connectivity currently, but we are really pushing to make sure that's connectivity with our project to other transit modes as well. When we first started this project, I look at social equity as a bigger conversation. It's not just the end use, who's the user, who's going to be riding the rail, but I also believe in terms of who's building it and who's a part of it. And so one of the things that we really focused on was inclusion, building the rail. When you look at different just different infrastructure projects without the state, without the country, you don't see a lot of people that are reflective of diversity, if it's people of color, if it's young people, if it's women in construction. And that was one of the things that was very important for us from day one. I think what makes any strong city, it is having diverse perspectives at the table. It makes good business sense. I think a lot of times we're just a little nervous in the sense of what that looks like, you know, when it is different perspective and diversity at the table, because we're not used to it. But I think that, oh yeah, we definitely got room. I mean, we have room to be a part of that for sure.
I'm Jeff Gaines. I am the Director of Sustainability and Urban Planning here at Albert Kahn Associates. I am an architect and a certified planner, and I have been with the company since the mid-1990s.
And I'm Alan Cobb, President and CEO of Albert Kahn Associates. I'm an architect and a designer. Over the years, been with Kahn 38 years. Albert Kahn Associates is an architectural firm headquartered in Detroit, and we've been here for 120 years.
Hello, I'm Mike Giovanni, Senior Associate, Senior Project Designer here at Kahn. I've been here at Kahn for 22 years now.
The social issue, certainly, of the deindustrialization of Detroit is being able to deal with and adaptively reuse the infrastructure that's here. And I think there have been several great examples here in Detroit of reusing that infrastructure in very positive ways. And Argonaut Building, the old GM building, their R&D center and design center is a perfect example of reusing this infrastructure in an extremely positive way by putting schools, charter schools, and universities in these buildings.
I think it hasn't been until maybe the last 10, 15, 20 years that we've really understood or placed a higher value on on the stuff that we developed, say 50, 100, 150 years ago. I think that's why you're seeing the resurgence in the downtown and the midtown areas and some of the older neighborhoods. It's a quality, it's a standard, it's a it's an atmosphere that just isn't readily duplicated. And we had actually, in my opinion, we had done very well. We had perfected, if you will, the master plan of how to cater to work, live, recreational needs. We had the model, but it didn't keep up with the times. And so we reinvented that model, and now we're questioning that model again, and we're starting to come back to our roots.
And with the advent of the highway, and many of you might know the very first expressways here in Detroit, the Davison, is that it fed into the mobility and the opportunity to move out into farther areas in the city. And many cities in the United States have experienced that in the last 70 years. The mobility, enabling people to get out and move around and look for these new opportunities that you mentioned.
The freeways were something that helped disperse people. They also provided the connectivity. I mean, they allowed people to move rapidly from one side of town to the other, and that, as Mike and Jeff were commenting, that created a kind of void in the middle, and that's what's happened in Detroit. That as the growth moved out of the city, the freeways were a good thing. They're also a bad thing in terms of decreasing the population in the center and disrupting perhaps the connectivity that was so much a part of this new center, which was one of the first really livable communities where people could live and work in the same area and walk to work. The connectedness here still exists to some degree, but with the disbursement, I think that our connections have been reduced somewhat, unfortunately.
Yes, and Alan, it's interesting to mention that here in Detroit over the last 10 years, and even more recently, the resurgence of a younger generation moving back into the city. We're finding that there's a younger generation that likes the urban context.
That wants the connectedness.
Yes, and the compression where you don't have to rely on the automobile.
What is it about Detroit that brings you here? Is it the stunning architecture? Is it the vibrant planning with the radial street grid and things that date back to Judge Woodward's plan of the early 1800s? And for the most part, I think folks would say, I don't know what you're talking about. What I know is that my dad or my grandfather or my great-grandfather came up here to work for Henry Ford or for General Motors, and they set roots here. And I'm here because of family, or I'm here because of friends. I'm here because of the attitudes of the social networks that I'm familiar with, that I can't find in other areas.
Toward what we might see as urban blight, in that there's optimism in these buildings. There's the potential for reuse. There's intrigue with how these buildings might find themselves 5-6 years from now, and we're seeing a lot of energy and in fact economic development around the adaptive reuse of these buildings. But I think it's going to be a very unique picture for Detroit in sort of the world stage.
It's encouraging when you start to see folks that get excited about different aspects of the city. We tend to be rather defensive. In other words, if you're a true Detroiter, you can criticize your neighborhood, but somebody from the outside, how dare you? But I think what we're starting to realize is that some of this is not necessarily criticism, it's actually constructive, in that we really need to take a broader look at ourselves and realize what kind of opportunities we do have. I think anytime you take a large metropolitan area and you start to refocus on not the actual physical core, but when you focus on the core of what where the city started, and you start to revalue that, I think that's very positive. I think what's concerning is that there are a large number of people that still feel today that they're being left out, and there's no reason that they should feel left out. Just from a pure physical size standpoint, this city has enough room for anybody and everybody that would like to be part of the resurgence that's going on. Hopefully we can find a way to work the economic model out so that people feel that not only do they have the space to occupy, but they have the livelihood and the standard of living that's in line with everybody else.
I see Albert County as a resource to the city. We've been tempted to leave the city over the last 15 years, and we've turned that down. We've decided to stick it out and stay here because our heritage is here. So many of our buildings are here. The building of the century, right? The Fisher Building is an Albert County building by the American Institute of Architects, and so that's why we're here. We're going to remain here.
Hello, my name is Rick Dye. I'm a principal at Albert Kahn Associates in Detroit, Michigan. We're down in our vault area. It's an area in the company where we maintain our historical records and documents for the many projects we've done over the years.
What we're looking at here is a typical set of older drawings that Albert Kahn put together when he was practicing here in the office. These drawings date back to the 1930s. This is a set from 1934. It's an older building, industrial building in Grand Rapids over on the west side of the state. We're looking at a study to try to convert that building to residential units. And so our effort right now is to understand what makes up the building, what are some of the encumbrances that current developers would need to look at. And so having these drawings available to us is very helpful. But these are old drawings. Most of the work that was done prior to the 1940s here in the office was done on linen, and it was done with ink. They had special pens called caliper pens that the draftsmen used to use, and they could adjust with just a little turn of a screw how wide the ink would flow from the pen. And so you could see on these drawings there's thick lines, there's thin lines. I mean, they're very, very detailed. These were skilled draftsmen that this is what they did 8 hours a day. Every drawing was an original.
In addition to the die shop at the Hudson Motor Car Company, this was back in, what year is this one? 1925. This was an addition. And they built these buildings a little bit at a time, put a second floor on, put a third floor on, expanded them until they finally combined all the buildings together.
It was quite innovative at the time and really allowed manufacturing, at least the buildings for manufacturing, that allowed them to flourish as well as they did in Detroit was something that Albert Kahn's brother, Julius Kahn, came up with, and that was called the Kahn bar. It was a way of reinforcing concrete so that you could build not only efficiently, but you could protect a lot of these manufacturing buildings from fire and other kind of damages. And one of the drawings here shows the result that you see in so many industrial buildings all across the country that really started here in Detroit in this office. And that was what's demonstrated here on this partial elevation, this enlarged elevation of a typical bay on a typical industrial building, which is basically constructed not of a wood heavy timber frame, but of a concrete frame. Concrete posts, concrete beams, and you could stack these up as high as required. It might be 2-story, 3-story, 4-story, or taller. They could be added onto over time, and then we could infill it with whatever would be appropriate, whether it would be windows for proper illumination of the activity going on beyond, or doorways, or we could fill it in solid. We could open it up and allow that to be an opening for the next addition that comes along. So that innovation in the structural aspect of these assembly plants was incredibly influential to future development.
My name is Bob Prudhomme. I'm Vice President and one of the founding board members of Transportation Riders United. We're a Detroit-based nonprofit whose mission is to improve the mobility for everyone in the Detroit region. Social equity is a multifaceted term. I think that we have the pieces in place to create a just and equitable society. I think there are a lot of people who would resist that out of fear. I think there are a lot of people who embrace that out of the joy. I attack it out of faith as a positive. To me, that's a better goal than to build a building. or to build a transportation system. You know, in Detroit, more than anywhere that I've ever lived, the philanthropic community has just thrown down a gauntlet and said, we are not going to abandon our city. And our government is changing. We have a new city charter structure. We have, I think, more inclusive city system. That gives me a lot of hope. As I said earlier, if we keep trying to answer or solve the problems with the same thinking that created them, we're just going to repeat it again. There is all kinds of room in my mind. I am so ignorant of so many things, Michelle. There's so many things I want to know about, and the only way I can know about them, I can go in the library here and I can open a book and I can read about them, or I can walk out the door and I can run into somebody and experience them. Now I ask you, which one do you think is the more robust and the more vital way to learn things?
But as manufacturing has changed, the ability for people to live the kind of lives that they came here from all over the world to live has changed too. And so I'm concerned with their ability to survive, to do well, and live meaningful lives. My name is Ishmael Ahmed. I'm a senior advisor to the Chancellor and Associate Provost for Metropolitan Impact here at the University of Michigan Dearborn. It creates success. What I'm finding is that creativity moves forward when people actually cross-pollinate and have different ideas and different backgrounds. And so Detroit has that in multiple, and so it's something that we've got to not only honor or see as, well, we're going to eat over here and we're going to eat over there, but actually harness and bring together to change all of the things that have to change. Social equity is really important as people learn what each other have, and wealth is popularized. I think we are moving more and more toward solidifying a social economic underclass.
Ray Lozano. I'm with New Detroit Incorporated, one of the oldest nonprofit race relations organizations in the country. I'm the division manager or the program lead for the organization. And a lot of the thousands of jobs that were available in the industry have disappeared, and so the competition is a lot fiercer, and so it creates all these pressures in communities. In particular, if you look at the Latino community, I grew up in Southwest Detroit, and there was a Cadillac plant that existed there, and during the 80s, the automotive industries were moving down south, and they were moving to other parts of the country and going foreign. And so the closing of the plant in Southwest Detroit devastated that community. It's taken many years for a recovery, because not only was it the plant, but it was the suppliers, it was the businesses that supported the workers. And so within a few years, the deindustrialization of Southwest Detroit took a devastating toll on that community and on jobs and residents.
Elite said, there's one apple bad in the box, we gotta move it out of the way.
That's right. That's right.
100%.
We're gonna get together tomorrow and resolve this.
Absolutely.
That's what I want.
That's what I'm saying. All three of us.
You do not believe in customers or anybody being called bitches, being called niggas, 100%. Being cursed out, being threatened.
I don't want nobody to call me that, or call my family or my sisters or my mother or my wife.
That's right.
Okay? Because I came from the Middle East just like everybody came here. We're all immigrants. We all here came to work hard. Treat everybody nice.
Well, some of us came on a slave ship.
That's true.
Not an immigrant ship.
Yes, you guys
There's
got
a
it harder
difference
than
in an
us.
immigrant ship and a slave ship.
That's right.
We'll talk tomorrow.
Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Good evening. We're back live, and joining us is Mayor Mike Duggan. Mayor Mike, once again, we want to thank you for coming, Mayor.
Thanks for having me, Minister.
Honored to have you. Mayor, let's get right into it. We got the water shutoffs.
Right.
The United Nations is condemning us. The world is condemning us. And people on Facebook are attacking you and me and other friends of yours, supporters of yours. People are saying you don't care about the water being turned off on poor people.
Well, I'm trying to deal with reality as I face it. And I sat with Kevin Orr when we started and laid out a case that I believed I could run city services in a much better way. And the water department in particular, I did not think was being well run. And I wanted the authority to do it. And I think, as you know, the emergency manager has been very clear. His goal is to privatize the water department, basically turn the whole thing over to a private company and displace the workers that are there and the like. And so what they are doing, I think, is trying to raise the profitability of the operation. But it's hard to imagine doing it any worse than the way that it's been approached. You know, why we didn't start with the commercial customers first, why we didn't get the funds set up first, so people who couldn't afford to pay knew exactly where to go, get that publicity out, notify people, and go that way would have been the right way to do it. But I don't want to miss the underlying point. People need to pay their water bills.
Hi, my name is Kevin B. I'm a master's student and a research assistant here at the University of Michigan. My major is sustainable systems in School of Natural Resources and Environment, and that's my background. Sustainability to me is not only about energy saving or emit less greenhouse gases, but also including the social metric, which is the social justice and fairness. So I think the energy within a sustainable system need to be well balanced and well targeted. So the bow and arrow is a metaphor. So when you discharge an arrow from a bow, you need to hold your breath first. And this is time when you accumulate the energy. You transfer the energy into the elastic potential energy in the bow. And when you accumulate that energy, you need to discharge it. So when you have a target, you discharge it into the kinetic energy, so the arrow goes out. So this is how you transfer the energy. So it's just like in the society, when you have energy inside your body, you need a way for the energy to go out. So this time you need to have a right target. So if your target is violence, then the bow and arrow become a deadly weapon. But if your target is the social justice, or the target is justified, then you are on the right track to build a more sustainable society. Speaking of the law of conservation of energy, I think it's all about whether you have the right target. And the sustainability to me is actually a philosophy of harmony. It's like Chinese Tai Chi or Kung Fu, and it depends on how you actually balance your energy.
Here we are at the conclusion of Life Beyond Fordism. We're here at the infant in the bulb of a plant. That's what's above me. And so we've taken a tour of Detroit, met some very interesting people. And we've done a full 360 back to the Rivera Court. And it is here I would like to make our conclusion. We've understood a little bit of the complexity about Detroit, its networks, and how they function, where we are. And this is the Renaissance, the Motor City, Hockey Town. We've gone to the North End, New Center, or some call the Boulevard. And it's here that I'd like to talk a little bit about the law of conservation of energy. As you know, we've gone out to Ann Arbor and we've talked about and looked at that from the potential energy to kinetic energy. And that brings us to the place of open and closed systems, and really what Talbia Inc. is all about. Here, we start off, what is a closed system? What does that look like? We can look at a closed system, it looks like my right hand. In a closed system, you don't have a feedback loop. It becomes deterministic. It is about being and information. There's a limitation with a closed system. My left hand, we have a visual of an open system. Here we have the feedback loop, and this is where Talbia Inc. will engage. We have the objective area and the subject area. And so because we have a feedback loop between the two of these, we have an open system. And in an open system, it's about becoming and practice. It was Pierre Bourdieu who inspired me to begin our programs, Vision Habitus. And Vision Habitus is about all what you see here and what is to become on our geographical landscape as we deem it. Helen Keller comes up with a great conclusion, I think. One individual, I'm going to paraphrase, basically, one individual can do so little, but together we can do a lot. So I hope you've enjoyed your tour of Detroit about the urban and social issues of deindustrialization, and you've learned many things from this. Remember, a closed system is deterministic. However, there's lots of limitations in it. An open system is where we can thrive, and where in one we have a feedback loop. Thanks again, and I'll see you around.
Is really about the diversity that exists here. And as Jeff was mentioning, they all came here for one thing usually. It was the job. It was a chance to become part of the middle class. And immigrants came here from all over the world because of the auto industry and because of the lumber, the rich resources that were here. And I think we celebrate that diversity in the city of Detroit.
I guess the traditional answer is our history. But I think it's a culmination of our culture that brings us to the place we are now. I am the sum of my past and my parts. I am not just those parts and my past.
Well, heritage, I think, has to do with one's cultural and historical continuum, I'll say. Placing ourselves, understanding how we place ourselves within our historical and cultural continuum.
I think heritage is defined by the values that you obtained from your parents and the values that you learned from your environment.
Define heritage based on who we are as a people. Heritage in terms of kind of some of the traditions that we have here in Detroit or in your personal home, your personal household. I believe that obviously where we come from is part of our heritage, how we're brought up, and the community around us.
Well, lots of reasons for revitalizing this area. When you look at Detroit, if you look at Detroit and the region in the big picture, it's the main corridor. It's an international community. It borders Canada, and it's the main corridor for the NAFTA highway, which begins in Mexico and ends in Canada, and vice versa. It goes back and forth. And so Michigan, as a result, is the third largest trading partner with Mexico after Texas and California. In Quebec, Canada, there's 18 million people in that geographic region.